We return now to the news that three ABC staff, reporter Paul Lockyer, cameraman John Bean and helicopter pilot Gary Ticehurst, are believed to have been killed in a helicopter crash near Lake Eyre in the north of South Australia. The world of current affairs and journalism in Australia is the poorer for the loss of these three men. Two of the country's best-known journalists, Channel 9's Ray Martin and the ABC's Kerry O'Brien, knew them professionally and personally.
Well, I've already said today that I can't think of a time I've ever heard anyone say a bad word about Paul in an industry that is known for its bitchiness from time to time, dare I say. But on the contrary, people have only ever had good things to say about him. I mean, just a truly lovely man, a real gentleman, and somebody who had an enormous affinity with people, which was part of what made him such a great journalist.
And Ray, you worked with him at Channel 9.
And here, and the ABC.
For many, many years. And you were at his house last night, I understand.
Yeah, no, I went up to see Maria and one of the boys. He has two boys. And Jamie was there, thankfully, and Nick, who works for Channel 10 these days, was up in Queensland doing something. He was coming back today. She's a tough lady, and so she's, at that stage we didn't have the news, but Mark Scott had been ringing regularly and keeping her up to date on what was happening. She's strong, but she's suffering.
But quite regularly, Paul Lockyer would be in touch with you, ringing you from the road, telling you he's got the best job in the world.
No, I told him he had the best job in the world. We'd done lots of things, the sort of story that we all love to do, but Paul did it better than anybody else. And he'd ring me and say, "Guess where I am? I'm in such and such a place." And it was always fun. It was, you really have to celebrate this bloke. I agree with everything Kerry said, that he was an impeccable journalist. And but no one says bad things about him ever, not even a bad word about him. But he was also good fun. My memories of him he's one of those blokes who used to have a 3-day birthday. Whenever Locker's birthday came along, you celebrated the day before and then the day off and the day after. One of those things. But he was great fun, apart from being a great journalist.
And of course, Kerry helicopter pilot Gary Ticehurst, cameraman John Bean were also killed in that helicopter crash. Both, again, the best in the business, and again, people who were liked by everyone.
Well, whenever you went through the door of a helicopter with Gary Ticehurst at the controls, you felt safe automatically. So there's some irony in this, and I would have no doubt that, as always, he put safety first out there near Lake Eyre. But a real consummate professional and a lovely guy, and had been so long flying helicopters for news teams that he'd become a part of the process, lived and breathed news just like anybody else, and would get involved in the stories. I mean, there was something of the journalist in Gary, even though he was sitting behind the controls of the chopper. John Bean, the ABC has had an extraordinary tradition of turning out really talented, top-class, creative camera people, and John was right in the front line of that. I mean, to look at those three people as a team, as they were, you would not find a better team of people in the business. You just wouldn't.
And of course, they won't just be missed by their colleagues, they'll be missed by the people who they worked with and reported on, the farmers and the people who lived in.
Yeah, the west of the mountains now will be mourning today, as they should, because they were so popular and also so good at. I always think one of the great tests of a good journalist is, can you go back tomorrow and talk to the same people that you've just done a story on, often critical if it had to be, and he could always do it. And I introduced him to some friends of mine just out near Hungerford, just west of Burke, and I've got a property out there, and they rang me after he'd done something with them, and one of the first of his hour-long specials, and they said, how come he lives in the city and he understands us, he understands what we're about.
I've had so many comments from people in the bush talking about Paul, asking after him, wanting to pass on their regards to him. He was the first person you'd go to if you were wanting to do something out in rural Australia, because he seemed to know everyone, certainly right up and down the east coast and further afield as well. The great thing about what he did in that job was to really bridge the gap, which has always been there between the city and the bush.
Yes.
To a greater or lesser extent from time to time. He understood the bush, he could tell the story well, always around people, droughts, floods and everything in between. Paul had such an affinity and such a feel for the story and such an understanding of how tough it could be out there, and reflected time and time again in the work he put to air.
And all done with great humour and a real gentle man.
Yeah, he was that. He was all that. He was. I remember one election night we did when I was at Nine, and I was doing the Saturday night, and Kerry was alongside us down in Canberra, and we were competing with the ABC obviously at Nine at that stage, and we didn't want everyone in a suit. And Lockers was going up to cover the electorate up in Airlie Beach in Queensland, and I said, well, you can't put a suit on Airlie Beach, and he said, no, I'll work it out. So I crossed to him live that night, and he was there. He had a pair of shorts and a Hawaiian shirt on, and a barbecue with a big fish on the barbecue, and yapping to some people around there, and he was just as factual and just as accurate as he always was, but he just looked the part, and that was him, and he would have blended in a country pub the same as he would have at Government House.
He covered various Olympics and Commonwealth Games, so the sporting community is going to be mourning him today. He covered politics. That's where I first met him, in Canberra in the 70s, and covered that with great distinction. He was a foreign correspondent just about all over the world, certainly around Asia, Southeast Asia and America. We were in America at the same time, and Ray, you might have been there at about the same time too. Mm. Everything he did was with class and distinction. But, you know, Gary Ticehurst, John Bean, three absolutely consummate professionals and three wonderful individuals.
And Roger, you've got to celebrate them too, because that's the extraordinary lives they've had. That Lockers used to have that. He picked up Tim Bowden's tag, the title of that book that Tim wrote about Neil Davis, which was A Crowded Hour, and Lockers subscribed to that. That was almost the mantra that, much better to have a crowded hour than an empty space, and that's why he was out there. Maria said to me last night that she said to him on Monday, do you have to go again? He's just finished this book on the lake, and you need to go down. He said, I need to go. There's something I've got to get. I've got to pick it up. Yeah. It was that thing, and they're sitting in the lounge room table as the prologue for the book that he's finished. And he finished it over the weekend, and it's sitting there. And he said, gave it to Maria and said, well, have a look at that and tell me what you think.
We'll let that be one monument to him.
Oh yes.
Ray Martin and Kerry O'Brien, thank you both for coming in and sharing your memories and your great stories. Thank you both on this sad day.
Of course.